In this case, the saying, "all roads lead to Rome," is most certainly applicable. Adam Weishaupt, founder of the Illuminati, and Voltaire, author of the Charter of Human Rights, and both motivators of the French Revolution, were Jesuit trained and included the essence of that institution's philosophy and methodology into their own organizations.
The Illuminati was created through Weishaupt, and of course is also the father of modern communism, who with his Jacobins conducted the French Revolution. Years later, Jesuit General Ledochowski with his Bolsheviks conducted the Russian Revolution in 1917, and it's identical to the other revolution. Let's have a look at Freemasons. The Grand Design Exposed says, "The truth is the Jesuits of Rome have perfected Freemasonry to be their most magnificent and effective tool, accomplishing their purposes among Protestants." Now surely the members of Freemasonry themselves must be deceived, because if they saw it, they wouldn't do it, right? So actually, the order is being used, and they themselves are deceived. And only within the order, higher up, are those chosen ones who know, and they are controlled by the Jesuits for Rome. Very clever. Very clever. To make Protestantism do what you cannot do openly because you have been fingered by Protestantism as the Antichrist.
Based on these evidences, the religio-political claims of the papal system and the prophetic time frames given for her rule, many modern-day biblical scholars and researchers into secret subversive organizations have concluded that no other institution other than Rome can fit the prophetic profile. Added to these evidences is the testimony of the Protestant reformers, who clearly, through their own studies of Daniel and Revelation, saw Rome as the Antichrist power described in Bible prophecy. When studying the book of Revelation chapter 13 and applying the principles of interpreting prophetic symbolism, the full impact of what begins to unfold in Daniel and the direct connection it has to this very era starts to become frightfully clear. The first beast of this chapter, that contains elements of a leopard, a bear, and a lion, seem to indicate that John is seeing the primary elements of the vision of Daniel 7 in reverse. These powers have passed, and qualities of their systems, judicial, political, and religious, survive in the institutions that arise after them, most specifically in the kingdoms and nations that now fall under the authority of Papal Rome.
So this is a conglomerate beast having components, philosophies, if you like, of Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and Babylon. And it speaks with the mouth of a lion.
In Daniel 7, we have all of these beasts described in detail. And then when we come to the book of Revelation, verses 1 and 2, it describes an amalgamation of all the beasts in Daniel 7 put together. And the Bible student would recognize when they come to Revelation 13 that this is taken word for word from Daniel as far as the beast combining. And not only that, the description of the little horn power in Daniel 7 is the same description we find in Revelation 13. For example, one of those criteria is that it would receive worship, it would speak blasphemy and all sorts of different things, and those are all found in Revelation 13. In Daniel chapter 7 and in Revelation 13, we see the same time period emphasized. The 1,260 days. It's described 7 times in the Bible in many different ways. Time times half a time, 42 months. And we see this exact same time period mentioned in Revelation 13, which describes how long the papal supremacy would be in power, from 538, the decree of Justinian, to 1798, when the papacy was dissolved of its political power, when Berthier marched into Rome and took the Pope captive. So we find all of those clues right there in both of the chapters, Daniel 7 and Revelation 13.
Labanca, professor of history at the University of Rome, says, to the succession of the Caesars came the succession of the pontiffs in Rome. Stanley's history says the popes filled the place of the vacant emperor at Rome, inheriting their power, prestige, titles from paganism. Constantine left all to the Bishop of Rome, which is not true, but nevertheless, the papacy is about but the ghost of the deceased Roman Empire sitting crowned upon its grave. So the legally recognized supremacy of the Pope began in 538 AD and then went into effect the emperor's decree, as I have said, where he was the corrector of heretics. So Rome today still claims to be the sole one who can determine what you should believe, because the papacy claims infallibility. He even has the title Pontifex Maximus, which belonged to the Roman emperor. So in effect, the Pope is the emperor of Rome today. I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death. So there is a mortal wound. And his deadly wound was healed, and some in the world wondered after the beast. Oh no, it doesn't say that. It says, all the world wondered after the beast. Revelation 13:7 says, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. That's scary. Rome will control the entire world.
The same characteristics found in Daniel 7 once again serve to describe this beast of Revelation 13. The period of rule, this time denoted in months, is identical, and thus students of prophecy who use the historicist method of prophetic interpretation conclude that this is a description of the Catholic institution that now, according to greater revelation, receives a wound that later on is healed. When this wound was given in 1798, at the time of General Berthier's entrance into Rome, the captivity of the Pope and the abolishment of the papal government, most observers believed at that time that it signaled the end of Roman Catholic rule. But in 1929, Mussolini and Gaspari signed an historic pact that once again returned to Papal Rome her sovereign nation status. The implications of these events and the prophetic revelations of chapter 13 are hard to avoid. Not only does Papal Rome rule for the 1,260 42-month period, but its authority is once again revived, not only through the actions of Mussolini and Gaspari in 1929, but through the help of another beast, a power that arises out of the earth and causes the whole earth to follow Rome in her new revived form. Many believe that the identity of this second beast can only be applied to the United States of America, the new Atlantis of the mystics that would bring about the final realization of a new world order. Revelation chapter 13 verse 11 states, and I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and it had 2 horns like that of a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon.
Well, let's go to the early reformers. These people were magnificent. I have so much respect for these early reformers. John Wesley, in his notes on Revelation 13, written in 1754, says, the 2-horned beast, he is not yet come, though he cannot be far off. For he is to appear at the end of the 42 months of the first beast. Now the reformers all clearly said, Rome is the Antichrist. They were watching it. And now they say, well, this other beast can't be far off. Let's have a look at the rise of the United States and see if it fits. The Declaration of Independence was in 1776. The independence was acknowledged by the nations of the world in 1783. In 1787, a Constitution of the United States was framed. 1791, the Bill of Rights was added. And in 1798, the very year that Rome receives a mortal wound, France, the mightiest power in Europe at that time, recognizes the independence of the United States. So the same nation that gives the papacy a mortal wound, in the same year recognizes the United States.
America was founded as a Christian nation, but it was also founded as an occult nation. And there have always been two parallel forces here in America. One the Christian, one the occult, dating back into the 1600s. And until you understand that, you can't understand anything going on in the world today.
From the very beginning, those who were trying to establish the nation of America and formulate the laws that would govern her people were caught between two agendas. The one agenda had lamb-like qualities that sought to avoid repeating the oppressive history of a Europe ruled by papal religio-political authority. The other agenda, although it outwardly preached liberation, was striving to set up an occult-inspired order that would finally lead all nations back to Rome. In Rome, all the mystery religions, from ancient Babylon and Egypt to the various other pagan cultures whose spiritual roots went back to the Tower of Babel, found their fulfillment. In her and under her supervision, and only under these circumstances, would man be able to experience 1,000 years of peace, the fulfillment of the Aquarian dream and its new Atlantean society. Rome fought hard to destroy the lamb-like attributes of the American Constitution. Through her secret army, the Jesuits, and the various other sinister organizations she controlled, she infiltrated American society and government, and where necessary fomented discord, controversy, and division. President Abraham Lincoln said of her involvement in the Civil War,
"The Civil War would never have been possible without the sinister influence of the Jesuits. We owe it to popery that we now see our land reddened with the blood of our noblest sons. Through all their councils, theologians, and canon laws, their conscience orders them to burn my wife, strangle my children, and cut my throat when they find their opportunity. Sooner or later, the light of common sense will make it clear to everyone that no liberty of conscience can be granted to men who are sworn to obey a pope, who pretends to have the right to put to death those who differ from him in religion."
Rome held the American Constitution, its separation of church and state, and the privilege of people to enjoy freedom of religion in contempt.
Rome's reaction to the Constitution of the United States, of course, was not favorable because the whole papal system was built on the union of church and state. And for a country now to come into being, which was giving liberty and freedom to all, was certainly contrary to the principles of the papacy. And consequently, as a result, Rome has worked through the centuries to try to change that and to overthrow the Constitution of the United States and to once again bring into being that deadly wound is going to be healed, and when it is finally healed, it will once again be church and state united, and the church will use the political powers and the civil powers to enforce her religious dogmas.
Decade after decade, Rome silently infiltrated the highest echelons of American society, until finally the dragon-like qualities of America began to reveal its shadowy visage. Meanwhile, Rome had not forgotten her agenda to re-establish her authority in Europe. Using the same strategy she was employing in America, she set about infiltrating the religious and political powers on the continent. Her task was easier in that familiar environment and very quickly began to bear fruit. While she was actively involved in setting up a socialist regime in Russia, she just as ardently worked at establishing the occult Jesuit-inspired system